Good Shepherd Sunday, second Sunday after Easter. It's good to be back here again in Madras. It's an historical day today because it is 365 days ago, 1 year ago, April the 14th, 2012, Bishop Fellay wrote a letter that was sent to the three bishops. On April the 7th, 2012, a year and 7 days ago, Bishop Williamson, Bishop de Galarreta, and Bishop Tissier de Malaray wrote a letter to Bishop Fellay, warning him that he should follow the path of Archbishop Lefebvre, and that his directive of March of 2012 was an incorrect directive. A directive that said that we must go towards modernist Rome and be willing to put ourselves under Rome. We should not do this because Rome is still in the state of modernism, and in fact it's in a worse state of modernism than it was in 1988 when Archbishop Lefebvre broke and would not have anything to do with the modernists and proved his protection of Catholic tradition and protection of the Catholic faith by the consecration of 4 bishops, for which he was rewarded with an invalid excommunication. And the result of these consecrations was the preservation of the Catholic priesthood, the preservation of the Catholic clarity of truth, the preservation of the Catholic faith down the last 25 years. Now in 2013 we celebrate in June the 25th anniversary of that great event which preserved the Catholic faith at the end of the 20th century. And at the same time, Bishop Fellay wanted to bring the society away from its original stance and bring it into a new position with regard to Rome. And he thought that he could bring the entirety of the faithful of Catholic tradition behind him. And he thought he could bring all the priests and the bishops behind him. And he told the Romans that they will follow me, and we will come in under Rome, and we will be a group that is under Rome, accepting minimally Vatican II, and then we will work from within to help reform the church. That was his desire. Forgetting that we were already within the church, and we never left it. Forgetting that the trouble of the church is not that good men are divided from bad men, or that truth is divided from lies. But the trouble of the church is that there are lies. The trouble of the church is that there are bad men doing evil things, and then good men must condemn these evil men. Good men must continue to speak the truth, and when good men compromise the truth, and when good men compromise the faith and compromise their good actions, evil prevails. It is never to the benefit of good to compromise with evil. This was the temptation that has hit our society in the last 12 years and has become known to us publicly in the course of this last year. Now, April the 7th, Bishop Williamson, Bishop de Galarreta, Bishop Tissier reminded Archbishop Lefebvre of the teaching of Bishop Fellay, of the teaching of Archbishop Lefebvre. Quoting Archbishop Lefebvre in 1989, Archbishop Lefebvre said, "Maneuvers to separate us, he feared that they are only maneuvers. When Rome makes gestures of benevolence towards tradition, Archbishop Lefebvre was wary. He feared that they were only," quote from Archbishop Lefebvre, "maneuvers to separate us from the greatest number of faithful possible." This is the perspective in which they seem to be always giving a little more and even going very far. We must absolutely convince our faithful that it is no more than a maneuver, that it is dangerous to put oneself into the hands of the conciliar bishops and modernist Rome. It is the greatest danger threatening our people. If we have struggled for 20 years to avoid the conciliar errors, it was not in order now to put ourselves in the hands of those professing these errors, unquote. We make only one change. It was not, we have not struggled for 40 years to avoid the conciliar errors. It was not in order now to put ourselves in the hands of those professing these errors. The struggle is now 40 years. In 1988, it was 20 years. We cannot put ourselves in the hands of the modernists because they will transform us into modernists. And those whom they do not transform into modernists, they will eat like the big fish eats the little fish. Like the lion eats its prey. And so this was the temptation. And on April the 14th, 2012, a new spirit came out of the Society of St. Pius X headquarters. And this spirit was in secret. And we want to point out today, 1 year later, on the anniversary of this important letter, some essential differences between the new spirit of Bishop Fellay and the superiors of the Society and the old one of the Society of St. Pius X, which we still stand. One spirit and the other spirit are warring against each other. And you see the results of that spirit on this April the 14th, 2013, 1 year later. Because Father Couture and Bishop Fellay will no longer tolerate the old spirit of the Society. Last week, under obedience, Father Christoph made the announcement in this very place, in this chapel in Madras, we will no longer say Mass here for you. Why did they decide that they would no longer say Mass? Two interesting points we'll arrive at later. One, they said, Father Christoph, reading the letter of Father Couture, that we can no longer say Mass here. We will no longer say Mass here because Joseph Raj has made his decision. He has decided to allow Father Francis and Father Joseph to say Mass in this chapel. The chapel that we built. He has decided to let Father Joseph and Father Francis say the Latin Mass and teach the Catholic faith in this church. And because he has decided to allow this, we will no longer say Mass here. And it was with a sad heart that we refuse to say Mass here. And then secondly, they are causing division. Father Francis and Father Joseph and the priests like them throughout the world, they are causing division. They are causing a split in this chapel. We'll come back to those points later. Now let's go over how it all really began for us. On April the 14th, 2012, 1 year ago, I was busy in the Philippines saying my Masses and taking care of my people. Father Valem was also in the Philippines, taking care of the people. Father Chazelle was also in the Philippines, taking care of the people. And there were secret letters, secret communications going back and forth between 3 bishops and 1 bishop. There were secret dealings with Rome. And there was a secret move to change the Society of St. Pius X so that one day we would wake up. And on that day we would discover that we are not what we once were. We would discover that we are no longer inside of the same citadel, inside of the same castle, no longer inside of the same battleship that Archbishop Lefebvre built for us. That somehow we're outside of it. We wake up one day and we're no longer in that battleship. We're no longer in that citadel. And that will be the day that we discover that a deal had been signed with Rome. Doctrinal declarations had been sent back and forth without our knowledge. And they had made doctrinal statements in our name. You know that when you're a little baby, you come into the church, and the little baby is not able to speak for himself. So what do? We get a godfather and a godmother, and the godfather and the godmother speak in the name of the baby, because the baby cannot speak in his own name. And we say, what do you ask of the church of God? And the godfather and godmother say aloud, so that the faithful and the priest can hear. Faith. They do not speak secretly in the name of the baby. The baby is also there, and the baby can also hear. He is not secretly brought into the faith. We never speak secretly about our faith. We speak openly about our faith. On April the 14th, 2012, there's a letter that Archbishop Fellay wrote to the 3 bishops 1 year ago today. And you shall all read this letter. Is against the old position held by these 3 bishops of the society. Out of 4 bishops, 3 hold one position, and the 4th one, the superior, holds another position, along with his 2 assistants, Bishop de Galarreta, Father Pfluger and Father Nelly. Firstly, the letter gives a good account of the gravity of the crisis and the shaking the church, and analyzes with precision the nature of the errors flying all around. However, the description of the letter of the 3 bishops suffers from 2 faults with regard to the reality of the church. One, it is lacking in a supernatural spirit, and 2, it is lacking in realism. First of all, the old view of the SSPX, the old view of Archbishop Lefebvre, the view of the 3 bishops, the view of the vast majority of priests of Catholic tradition down the last 40 years, the view of the faithful who have had to fight this fight down the last 50 years, which is the same view. No compromise with modernism. Stand clear and firm upon the doctrine of the faith. And do not put yourself into the arms of the modernists. It lacks a supernatural spirit. One has the impression that you are so scandalized that you no longer accept that what could still be true, what might still be true. Is still Benedict XVI the legitimate Pope for you? If the Pope expresses a legitimate desire concerning ourselves, which is a good desire, and commands nothing contrary to the commandments of God, doesn't one have the right to pay attention? Has one the right to pay no attention, to simply dismiss his desire? Do you not think that if our Lord gives a command, He will also give us the means to continue our work? Well, the Pope has let us know that his concern to settle our affair for the good of the Church, and it has been the very heart of his pontificate. And he also knew it would be easier for both him and for ourselves to leave things as they presently stand. Notice the change. Archbishop Lefebvre used to say, we adhere with all our hearts to eternal Rome, and we refuse Rome of modernist and neo-modernist and neo-Protestant tendencies, and we refuse all of the reforms, every one of the reforms that come from this modernist Rome. We refuse them all. Why? Because there is a new heresy called Modernism, which infiltrates every single document of the Council and is the spirit of the Council. And this heresy of modernism is the spirit behind all the changes that are going to be done in the Church. And therefore, we reject them all. We just reject them all. We have a simple and clear stand based on the doctrine of the faith. But now, we talk about impressions, scandalized, questions. This is the language of the modern man. You seem to be scandalized. Will you give us the impression that you don't accept the Pope as the Pope? Women stand on impressions. Children are impressed by impressions. But men stand on the truth. Men stand on doctrine. And God wanted His church to be ruled by men. Men who are supposed to use their reason. Men who are supposed to pay attention to what is the teaching and not what is the impression. Each person can get their own impression. And Bishop Fellay is saying, even though you say you are not a sedevacantist, even though you say you believe in the Pope, you give the impression. The impression. We used to speak of doctrine, now we speak of impressions. And that's what we mean by the lack of a spiritual and supernatural spirit. The Pope wants us to come back to Rome. And he says this is God's command. How do we know that it's God's command? God does not command in an unclear way. And how can we come back to something we have never left? We have never left Rome. We have never left the church. If a man comes to this Mass who died 200 or 1,000 years ago, he will immediately recognize that this is a Catholic Mass. He will recognize that this is Catholic teaching. He will recognize that everything here is Catholic. But if you send him across to the Little Mount, he will not recognize anything. Because it is a Protestant Mass. It is a Protestant teaching. It is not with God. It is not Catholic. Catholic is one, holy, Catholic, and apostolic. And where there is one, where there is holy, and where there is Catholic, and where there is apostolic, these four marks or signs of the church, there is where the Catholic Church is. We have those four marks. We never gave them up. From the time of our baptism until today, we never gave them up. You see dangers and you see plots everywhere. But we think things are getting better. And we say at the same time that your attitude lacks realism. We are discussing impressions and attitudes. Essentially, the difference between the new SSPX and the old SSPX is this. The new SSPX looks at impressions and attitudes, looks at optimism and pessimism. Like Father was telling me last week. Father told me last week, you are a pessimist, but I am an optimist. I think things are getting better. You think there's no hope. And so now we speak of optimism and pessimism. We speak of good attitudes and bad attitudes. We speak of impressions of being schismatic, impressions of being sedevacantist, impressions of being united with Rome. Kingdoms are not built on impressions. You can't even have breakfast with an impression. If you have the attitude that you had a good breakfast, and if you had the impression that the food was good, you don't eat. You have to have real food. It has to be really cooked, and then it has to be eaten. Impressions don't fill your belly. Attitudes don't change your life. We stand upon real things. But the New Society speaks of impressions and attitude, speaks of trust and confidence in an individual. Father Rostand said many times, Father Launay, the same thing. Father Couture, the same thing. Bishop Fellay, the same thing. These priests have lost their trust. These faithful have lost their trust in the superiors. And if only they had that trust, everything would be okay. If only they spoke to us openly, everything would be okay. They forget that we all, or 90% of us, spoke with him openly. We wrote him letters, maybe more than 100 letters from priests. We spoke with him openly at priest meetings and in individual conversations. We asked openly spoke openly about our concerns, and we received no answers. If only they had a good attitude, if only they spoke openly, then everything would be fine. Your attitude lacks realism, both as to the depth and the breadth of the crisis, of the errors. So it's the attitude is not realistic. First of all, the depth, says Bishop Fellay to the 3 bishops last year on this day. Within the society, we are in the process of making the Council's errors into super heresies, as though it is becoming absolute evil, worse than anything, in the same way that liberals have dogmatized this pastoral council. The evils are already dramatic enough, so that one need not exaggerate them any further. No more distinctions are being made. You are making the council into super heresies. And he says this is a new thing. Archbishop Pfeiffer was very clear. And all the old society priests were very clear from the beginning, as well as the early priests of tradition who are friends of the society. Always very clear. This council is the worst event that ever happened in the history of the Catholic Church. It has led millions and crores of souls to hell. It is the greatest disaster. It is the super heresy. St. Pius X himself says it's a super heresy, and he died in 1914. He said in his encyclical Pascendi in 1907 that modernism is essentially the super heresy of all heresies, that it is the sewer that catches all the heresies of all time into one place. That's an essence of a super heresy. And Vatican II is the council of modernism. It is the council of evolutionary modernism, in which that evolutionary modernism is everywhere throughout the council, poisoning everything in the council. It is the most super heresy and filled with super heresies, and yet Bishop Fellay no longer believes that it is filled with super heresies. Who's changing? We still teach what we have always taught. It is a super heresy. Bishop Fellay says, well, you are changing, but now he believes no more that it is a super heresy. And the breadth of the crisis. On the one hand, the present authorities are blamed for all the errors and evils to be found in the church, leaving out the fact that they are trying, at least partly, to free themselves from the worst of them. Here, Bishop Fellay is saying, you are blaming the bishops of Vatican II for all the errors of Vatican II. You are blaming the Pope of Vatican II for the errors of Vatican II. Of course we're blaming them. They were the bishops at the council. He was the Pope at the council. They were the ones that wrote the documents. They were the ones that signed it. They were the ones that promoted it. Pope Paul VI was the one who with an iron fist forced the council down everyone's throat. He is the one that forced the new Mass down everyone's throat. The authorities are to blame for the errors in the church. And then he says, but the authorities are trying to partly free themselves of the worst of the errors. Which one? Religious liberty? Nowhere did Pope Benedict XVI say he was against religious liberty. He was very clear in his promotion of religious liberty. Ecumenism, the great requests of the Jews and of many others, including the Muslims and leaders and some of the other religions, say, we really hope that Pope Francis continues the ecumenical gestures that were started and moved forward by his predecessor, Pope Benedict XVI. He was a very ecumenical pope, and unless there be any doubt, let us look at Assisi number 3. He was even ecumenical to the atheists, gathering the atheists to pray. To whom do the atheists pray? He had the atheists gather in prayer. A representative of atheism, a woman, saying words of prayer at the Assisi number 3. Is he freeing himself of ecumenism? Is he freeing himself of religious liberty? Is he freeing himself of collegiality? Not one of the errors of the council did Pope Benedict XVI condemn. He never condemned any of the errors. Not only that, but he was a pope of the council. He said, I am a pope of the council. That is why the pope resigned. The pope resigned in order to change the papacy. He resigned in order to show that he was a true Vatican II pope. The pope is now an elected official who stays for a certain amount of time, and then he retires, goes to his pope retirement home with his baseball cap, watches movies, watches the news, takes a walk in the garden, which is what the pope is doing in his retirement. The Pope Benedict XVI was the most liberal, worst pope in history. And yet we say that he was showing signs of getting rid of some of the worst errors of the council. Absolutely not. He wanted to perfect the modernism, because the modernist wants all the doctrines to fit together in the same. You can believe in your Latin Mass, no problem. As long you can also believe in a homosexual Mass, and you can believe in a Buddhist Mass, and you can believe in a Hindu Mass. All the Masses are good. And it fits inside of modernism to bring the Latin Mass people in, like Father Alvaraj invited us to do a few years ago. We were going to have the 10 a.m. Mass on the top of the hill there. The Telugu Mass was going to be at 11. Our Mass was going to be at 10. The Tamil Mass at 9. The English Mass at 7. And Father Alvaraj invited us to come in and say the 10 o'clock Latin Mass. All we had to do was not condemn the council and not be too negative. And we got to fit in the slot. Father Alvaraj made that offer. And we had to say no. Because we are here to condemn what he is doing. We are here to condemn the errors. Though we like Father Alvaraj, I was always friends with Father Alvaraj. But nonetheless, not with his doctrine, not with his modernism. They want to mix us in. And now Bishop Fellay is falling for the trap to want to be mixed in. So we get to have our Latin Mass inside of the pantheon of the modernist errors. And then also, he says, it is an objective fact, says Bishop Fellay. It shows that it is no longer an illusion to think of a fight arising within the church, even if we are well aware of how long and difficult it will be. Let us go and fight within the church. That's what he says. He has forgotten that we're already in the church. And we have been fighting within the church for 40 years. And the results of this fight is that there has been a coming back to tradition amongst some. The results of this fact has been the growing of Catholic tradition throughout the world. This is the result of the fight. There have been souls that have been saved throughout the world by the work of Archbishop Lefebvre. We have been fighting within the church. We have never left it. But now Bishop Fellay says in his letter of last year, April the 14th, it's no longer an illusion to think that we can fight within the church, even if we are well aware of how difficult and long it will be. And then he says, fewer and fewer Romans believe in Vatican II. Those Romans elected Francis I. Who was elected specifically because he is the best cardinal to move forward the Vatican II heresies into the next level. Pope Francis this week is choosing 8 cardinals who are going to give advice on how to reform the church. Remember, Pope Benedict XVI talked about the reform of the reform? Well, guess what? Pope Francis is going to continue the reform of the reform. And he is going to make the church more liberal and more modernist than it was before. He's going to bring it to the next level of modernism. And sure, the traditional Catholics can come along the way. Everyone can fit inside of this pantheon. And then most importantly, or secondly, before going on, church history shows that the curing of evils afflicting it normally happens gradually and slowly. And when one problem is over, there is another that begins. O porta heresies esse, it is necessary that heresies arise, that there be heresies. It is not realistic to require that everything be settled to arrive at what you call a practical agreement. Here we see Bishop Fellay going away from the Blessed Virgin Mary. There's going to be a slow recovery over tens of years by priests slowly bringing back tradition one step at a time. Our Lady says an opposite solution. She says that the church is going to get worse, that it's going to deteriorate, that there will be less and less of the true faithful, of the true remnant. And then, when things are at the absolute worst, that will be the moment of the victory of Our Lady. Even a priest told me last week, we cannot put too much confidence in Marian apparitions. We cannot put too much confidence in these private revelations. The Blessed Virgin Mary spoke from heaven to 3 little children at Fatima, and she spoke for us. And we put complete confidence in her. And we have complete confidence that what she says is true. And we have complete confidence that when she says she will bring the victory, she will. And when she says the condition of the victory is the consecration of Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, and for the faithful to continue to say their daily rosaries, to keep a devotion to the Sacred and Immaculate Hearts, we believe and we implement what she says. But the new society under Bishop Fellay no longer believes. It believes in another solution. The slow solution of us slowly converting the people. And then lastly in this letter, Bishop Fellay says, this dialectic between the truth and faith on the one side and authority on the other is contrary to the spirit of the priesthood. And here is the key to the matter. Bishop Fellay says there cannot be a dialectic, that is, there cannot be a fight or a conflict between truth and authority. The truth cannot have conflict with authority, and faith cannot have conflict with authority. We have the great example of St. Hermenegild yesterday, whose feast was yesterday. Hermenegild was killed and became a martyr because his father, the king, put him to death because he would not accept Arianism. The authority killed Hermenegild because he chose truth over authority. And Archbishop Lefebvre said on June the 13th, 1988, when speaking to the 4 bishops elect, the martyrs had always to choose between faith and authority. This was always the choice of the martyrs. It is our choice, and they always chose faith. But the new society says there can be no true conflict between faith and authority. These things were said in secret last year. They became public. It started a crisis. And Bishop Tissier, the 3 bishops said, Your Excellency, Fathers, Father Pfluger and Father Nelly, be careful. You are leading the society to a point from which it will no longer be able to turn back, to a deep division of no return, and to destructive, powerful influences with which the society will not be able to cope if you come to such an agreement with Rome. If up to now the bishops of the society have protected it, it is precisely because Monsignor Lefebvre refused a practical agreement. Since the situation has not changed substantially, and since the condition laid down by the General Chapter of 2006 has not come to realization, a doctrinal change in Rome which would permit a practical agreement, listen again to your founder. He was right 25 years ago. He is still right today. On his behalf, we entreat you, do not engage the society in a purely practical agreement, which is not purely practical. It is agreement in which we have changed our position. And the position is essentially this. The new position is Vatican II is still bad, but it is not essentially bad. It's accidentally bad. And it can be interpreted in the light of tradition. Interpreted in the light of tradition, Vatican II is okay. And the Church does not need to condemn the errors of Vatican II. It just simply needs to gently let them flow away, because the Church must preserve its authority. Bishop Fellay said that just a few weeks ago. We can let the errors drop in order to preserve our authority. The true authority, when he recognizes that he has done wrong, he begs forgiveness. Henry II was responsible for the martyrdom of St. Thomas Becket. Within 2 years, Pope Innocent canonized him a saint. He then told King Henry, "You have murdered and martyred a saint. You, the king, have been responsible for the killing of a saint. You must beg forgiveness." And King Henry II, the King of England, had to go in front of all the English people on the steps of Canterbury Cathedral, and he took off his clothes from the waist up. He went in, and he was flogged by the monks. He was whipped by the monks. He did public penance, the king. He publicly repented. He publicly told the subjects of England that he was wrong for having allowed St. Thomas Becket to be killed. And this is the way popes have acted in the old days. And the king showed himself to be a true king because he repented, and he publicly repented, and he did not see this public repentance as a threat to his own personal authority. But in the new society of St. Pius X, the authority has taken the place of God. The authority is the only representative of the will of God. Who caused division in this chapel? Who caused division everywhere in the world? Bishop Fellay and his superiors under him. Who said that Father Christoph could not come into this church? No one. He chose and he refused to come back. Why? Because he's under obedience from Father Couture. Who is dividing the chapel in Madras? Father Couture, Bishop Fellay, the new doctrine and the new practice. They told Father Chazelle and I, "Why didn't you go back to your priories?" We did go back. And when we were back, we were refused to eat meals with the other priests. We had to eat in the library. We were refused to speak to the brothers of our community. The sacristy was locked so that we priests could not say Mass. We were forbidden to say Mass even on the side altars. The only reason we were able to say Mass is because we carried our own personal Mass kits. The priests were told that they must refuse us absolution. They could not absolve our sins, but our sins were reserved to Bishop Fellay. How can we live in the priory in which we cannot celebrate Mass? Before that, I was told, you may return to Davao, my priory in the Philippines, on the condition that you are silent. You cannot preach against the modernism contained in this document of April 14th. You cannot preach against the errors contained in the July 14th Declaration of the Society of St. Pius X. You cannot preach even indirectly against these things. You cannot preach anything that may be considered negative or may be construed as a kind of criticism of the superior general or his direction. Under these conditions of silence, you may be allowed to return. We cannot follow such sinful conditions. The shepherd must warn the flock. What do we stand on? Doctrine. Last year, on May the 27th, it's almost a year now, the Feast of Pentecost, Father Chazelle and I preached the first sermons that were publicly released. We had preached before that, but publicly released to the world. They went all over the world. Then other priests preached all over the world. And what happened? More than 20 priests have been thrown out. There are now about 50 priests who have been separated from the society in one way or another, either friends of the society or members. Faithful have been threatened with the refusal of Holy Communion, threatened with their children being cast out of our schools, and through threats that you experienced right here. Do not receive Father Francis and Father Joseph into your homes. If you receive Father Francis and Father Joseph to say Mass in this school, then there will never be another Mass in this school. That's called the sacramental threat. Now, if Father Francis and Father Joseph are teaching heresy, if they are saying lies that are harming the faith of souls, if they are doing something very seriously, objectively wrong, then say what it is. Point out what the crime is. Prove us guilty. And give the reasons why we cannot be tolerated. Disobedience is not a reason. We were always obedient to our superiors. We are not fighting over obedience. We are fighting over faith. And the priests of the society are being commanded to be silent throughout the entire world. Many of these priests are very upset. They're very unhappy. Right now, the society is working closely with Rome. Rome is working with the society. Are they speaking about it? No. We're waiting for the return. Last year, on April the 15th, one day after this April the 14th, on this April the 14th letter, Bishop Fellay says, Rome has approached us. We're not approaching Rome. The next day, within 12 hours, or rather within 24 hours, he sent a letter to Rome, approaching Rome. Within 24 hours. And in that letter, he made a doctrinal declaration in the name of the whole Society of St. Pius X. And in that doctrinal declaration, which was dated April the 15th, 2012, which you should all read, it was released only a month ago, Bishop Fellay says, the new Mass is valid and legitimately promulgated, meaning it's a legitimate Mass. We have always condemned the new Mass as illegitimate. It may be valid. It is always illicit and illegitimate, always wrong to go to that Mass. And we have always told that to the people for the last 50 years, 40 years since we've been a society, 50 years since that Mass came into being, or 40 years. We've always told them that. Now we say that it's legitimately promulgated. Also, we accept a new code of canon law. Last week, Father Pfluger was in Post Falls, Idaho, and he gave a talk. At the end of the talk, one of our parishioners asked him a question. Last year, a doctrinal preamble was sent to, doctrinal declaration was sent to Rome. And in that doctrinal declaration, Father Pfluger, the society said, we accept the new Mass as valid and also legitimate. And we accept the entirety of the new code of canon law. And part of the new code is that non-Catholics can go to Holy Communion. Do you believe that non-Catholics can go to Holy Communion? And Father Pfluger responded, he had about 20 or 30 that was his response. And in between his in between all those words, he said, Well, I mean, we had good, there were theologians, and they looked at it, and it didn't look that bad. We thought it was okay at the time. And besides, it's a year ago. Why dig up something that happened a year ago? It's a bit like saying, when the police come to arrest a man, I'm sorry, Mr. Jones, but you are arrested for the murder of your cousin who was killed 1 year ago. Why bring up the past? He's been dead for a year. What are you doing bringing up the past? You guys are being like, he's been dead, he's not going to come back to life. What are you bothering me about it for? Because you murdered your cousin, and we're going to put you on trial. And when we find that you are guilty, we're going to hang you by the neck until dead. And if there's not a power cut, we might give you the electric chair. But the fact is, what are we saying? Father Pfluger says, oh, that was a year ago. It seemed pretty good at the time. Now imagine Father Pfluger, the first assistant of the Society of St. Pius X, telling us that the theology didn't seem bad 1 year ago. That 1 year ago, it seemed okay to say the new Mass was acceptable. 1 year ago, it was acceptable for the SSPX priest to give Holy Communion and ecumenical hospitality to non-Catholics. We had our top theologians working on it. What does that mean? Find out who those top theologians are and fire them, remove them. Find out who was responsible for writing that document and remove them from all ministry. We know the names of 3 people involved in that document. Bishop Fellay, the Superior General of the Society, Father Pfluger, and Father Nelly. They must be removed, and removed immediately. They must resign. Imagine that this had come out in any normal organization. They would have to resign immediately, within 24 hours of the word being released. They have betrayed the position of Catholic tradition. They have betrayed the teaching of our Church of the Faith. They have betrayed the Catholic faith. Maybe they meant well, maybe they didn't. Only God knows. But one thing is for certain, in black and white, Father Pfluger and Father Nelly and Bishop Fellay and the top theologians of the Society of St. Pius X said the new Mass and the new sacraments are not only valid, but they are legitimate, which means we shouldn't be doing conditional confirmations anymore. We shouldn't be doing conditional ordinations anymore. And that the new code is fully acceptable, which means that we should be giving Holy Communion to non-Catholics. And like Pope John Paul II said, what is the new code? It is Vatican II put in practice. So that means we should put Vatican II in practice. This is contrary to the truth, and it is contrary to the teachings of the Catholic faith. It is contrary especially to the work of Catholic tradition, which is to wage war against modernism, to wage war against the modern errors, to wage war against these things. And now the priests that wage open war are being thrown out and silenced throughout the whole world. And what are they telling you? They're being disobedient. They're being disobedient. But in any case, you can try water there. Try a little water. But in any case, we have to persevere in the true faith and not change. And we must recognize that whatever division has been caused in the society is caused by those who change, by those who have swung the axe, by those that are punishing, by those that are making the changes in doctrine, by those that are changing our official organs of communication, and not by us who stand on the same doctrine that we taught since we were in the seminary and since we were ordained priests, who stand on the same ground that we've always stood on, which is the ground of solid Catholic doctrine. We stand on that ground. We are not the causes of division. But in any case, we'll close it at that, and God bless you all, and the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen.